Will we have water? We're talking about the future of agriculture and probably what I think is our most precious resource that we sometimes mismanage and abuse. I've got two experts talking about this very question. Will we have water to grow the crops we need to feed this world? That's what we're talking about in this episode of The Business of Agriculture. Before we hop into this awesome topic, I want to tell you about my friends over at AgView Solutions. AgView Solutions specializes in helping farmers with transition planning, cost of production, strategic growth, biz opportunity analysis, and just overall improvements to your farm or agribusiness's bottom line, acting as an advisor. The team at AgView Solutions is comprised of consultants who also farm and run multiple businesses. They get it. Check out their service at agviewsolutions.com. They help farms in 25 states as well as Canada. They even do workshops that are tailored for ag businesses. You can find out more at agviewsolutions.com. That's agviewsolutions.com. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. I got a great one for you today. This one is going to be something that you may think about all the time, depending on where you are, or you may not think about it at all. We're talking about water. You might have seen some of my stats, my ag commentary. I think we've unagricultured about 5,000 acres of farmland in California in the last quarter century. We have lots of companies that obviously work in irrigation. I've worked for some of them. We've got subsurface drip. We've got pivot irrigation. We got all this kind of stuff. But do we really actually use water the way we should? Are we as judicious with its application as we should be? Here's where I think things are going. Water management is going to become a bigger deal. And I'm talking about the groundwater. I'm talking about the surface water. I'm talking about the nutrients we put out there. I'm talking about the water itself. I believe that we are not managing it as well as we should, and regulation is coming because you know what always happens? We just don't think about it. We put our heads in the sand in agriculture, and the next thing you know, a bunch of people are asking the question, hey, why am I going through a water restriction when they're growing these crops out here that we don't even need so much that we're paying subsidies to the farmers? That's where I think the future is going. But you know what? I've got two smart dudes on here. I got Preston Marthey. He's with PumpTrakr. His entire career has been spent in water and irrigation. He's out of Arkansas, but he knows what's happening in the rest of the world. He's joined by Brant Peterson. Brant is with the Kansas Water Authority. He's on the board for them. He is also a farmer, fifth-generation farmer in Kansas, and he also is on the Kansas Grain Sorghum Commission. Saw both these guys when I was at Commodity Classic earlier this month, last month, I guess, as it were, and I said, you know what, these would be two to come on here. So anyway, welcome to the show. Brant, you've got a lot of commentary on this. We're going to lead off with Preston. Preston, real quickly, your background. You're in Arkansas. There's lots of water there. What's the big deal? Brant's out in western Kansas. There ain't no water there. It's a big deal. You think it's a big deal everywhere.
Well, I do think it's a big deal everywhere. I have a 30-year career in this, spanning from the laser business and doing the drainage side of that from surface, all the way going into what we're doing now with CropX and the soil moisture sensors, and what we're doing with PumpTrakr and pump automation. And in that time, the amount of water critical areas for our aquifers has just increased. And this does not matter. You know, as some people might tell you in the car business, if you were buying 4 or 5 vehicles at a time in a fleet deal or something else, hey, the WAD works. Well, the WAD doesn't work here, people. We're looking at years where we had plenty of rain, years where we didn't have plenty of rain. We're not recharging the aquifers quick enough. If we're going to be stewards of the ground, as we always talk about, then we need to be stewards of what is going on underneath our feet. And, the groundwater is very, very important to that. And yeah, in that time, I've absolutely seen it. There are several places in the United States that don't have the same water issues that other folks do. Their water issues are just about drainage. What are we going to do to get that subsurface to where we're not drowning out the roots? Things of that nature. That's, it's everybody has their own unique situation as to what's going on. And then the victim, or not the victim blaming, but the blaming starts whenever you start talking about various kinds of irrigation practices out there. Some people believe that overhead irrigation is vastly superior to that of flood irrigation. Some people believe that the subsurface drip is a much better way of going at it. Everybody's got their own opinion in it, but when it comes down to it, the facts don't bear it out. You're having issues. You're either having issues with evaporation, or there's something that's coming into play for you in every one of your in every one of your applications and the way that you do your irrigation and how much water you actually have to play with out there. The problem is that we have literally looked at these guys and said there's a 2 or 3 point plan that you could use to better use your water, to use less water, to gain more yield, to use less energy, whether that be through fossil fuel or electricity, and get there before we have to have people think that I'm out here trying to say I want regulation. Are you kidding me? I'm the last person on earth that wants regulation. Okay. But I'm trying to tell you, if you self-govern what's going on, it will make you money. But people look at water as if it doesn't cost a thing, which is absolute folly.
So, Brant, let's get into you. You can probably respond to just about any part of that you want, unless you need me to lead you in the right direction. But I think the big one right there is, will there be regulation?
Well, so right now in Kansas, we're going through a situation where there was a statute put in place where the legislature obligated the GMDs or the areas to come up with a plan to minimize the amount of depletion of the aquifer to a level called Q stable, which is kind of a leveling off of the depletion. And the GMDs have July 1st of 2026 to submit that to the chief engineer of Kansas. And then the chief engineer has 90 days to kind of review that, work back and forth with them, and then work on a plan to implement that. Now, if the plan is not deemed to be effective enough or not a serious enough attempt at it, then the legislator can then challenge the chief engineer to come up with his own plan. So you're absolutely right.
This is Kansas specific, and I think
this is Kansas very specific.
We got listeners in Australia that tune into the business of agriculture. I got a very smart audience, and I've also got. Granted, we mostly cover the United States. We've got a lot of Canadians, some Europeans, folks in Australia. So just so the person that's listening to this, what we're talking about is not Kansas specific. Obviously, that's where Brant works and operates. But let's go back to the thing that Preston said. Is it a reality that we are not replenishing the aquifer? I don't know how it's even a debate. I mean, so speak to that.
It's not a debate. And the point I was making there with the regulation, that is a Kansas specific. And yes, regulation is coming because the decline has not been handled on our own. So then you talk about the recharge. I have two navigable, one-time or navigable rivers in the southwest corner of Kansas that are both dry now, more or less. That water comes from uphill. That's Colorado. You know, the development that's gone on the Front Range and beyond in Colorado is using up water. And you talk about a value put on water, which we were slow to include that. But today, if you want to put a tap on at the municipality up on the Front Range, it's $63,000 just for a tap. That's not the meter. That's not the water use. That's not anything else. That's just a tap. So when he talks about,
now, is this for a house?
What you said,
about like if I want to build a house there, I've got $63,000 before I can even put a foundation and some studs up.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And
so by the way,
that's great.
What you said, water. It is a finite resource. It's also renewable. Yes. Obviously, as you know, yes. People that say you're wasting water. Well, the reality is, the only water that leaves the United States does so on a spaceship, right? So we got that. But the problem isn't that it's been a finite resource since humans, climbed out of the sea as amoebas, whatever you want to talk about. But the issue is rate of use. Is that right, Preston? It's rate of use versus recharging.
Yeah, that's correct. The efficiency at which you use the water. How many inch acres do you need to apply to a crop in order to get it there and get it done? And that, and that varies between people. Right. What they think that should be done because that's the way it's always been done or something else. And they don't, and they won't adapt to it, or they take into account that years ago, because obviously the technologies that I'm a part of right now between soil moisture meters and pump automation have been around for a very long time. Scheduling on some level has been a practice for some time, but they look at it at the early days before we had decent platforms and easy to use and easy to read data out there available for each one to kind of make a plan and actually execute it. They think about the days when it wasn't, and they've used that as an excuse to not go after this. and nobody's made them pay the piper yet. And because of that, they just don't want to mess with it until it's done. And we all know that the government doesn't react until it's too late anyway on almost anything that goes on. And so by the time we do get regulated, why? So this is leading to the next thing, which is, I think, where people are going to, where I think this is headed, just because I know too many studies that are going on right now. I have NDAs involved that I can't talk about exactly who it does, but I know the studies involving right now, how much water can each farmer save so that we can use it for data centers, for building infrastructure that would actually take care of our lack of electrical grid across the United States, things of that nature, all of which is going to take some water in order to get done. My problem is that we've literally let this get to a point now, and these guys come in. Are we entering a zero-sum game territory where we're going to now be told to save the water for these guys only to use that? Yeah. And are we recharging the aquifers, or are we just making sure we have enough to be able to take care of infrastructure for data centers and anything else? The other side of that argument is, and Damian, we've talked about this before, you talk about it all the time, the glut that we have right now, the overabundance of product for the amount of production that we have been doing in ag, okay, has led us to a point where do we market it? Okay, maybe we need to produce less. So then that comes in where somebody else has kind of argued to me. They said, Preston, if we end up having to take out 200 or 300 or 400 acres worth of production or more for a data center to use all that water, then we're doing two things. We're not wasting it. We're not wasting any more water than we used to, but we're also increasing the amount of price that we may or may not get for our crop because we we take the water we that's the and I want Brant to definitely get in on this because I'm sure this is a hot topic with the Kansas Water Board. Basically what we're saying is we're now poised with a situation where agriculture is going to be told, well, you don't need this water because we got plenty of surplus of crops anyway, and we need this for data centers to be competitive with China, as we've been hearing, and I want to get into that. Before I do, I want to remind you, if you are a fan of the business of agriculture, I have sponsors I'd like you to know about, like my company, my friends over there at Nano Yield. Nano Yield is a company that makes products that make your crop inputs more effective. Nano Pro. Patented mineral-based nanoparticles that go in the tank. So if you go across your crops 3 times, Brant's out there in Kansas, he goes across the crop maybe 3 times with a sprayer. Imagine dumping some Nano Pro in the tank mix. It makes your weed control more effective. Your fungicide perform better. It makes your nutrients work better when they hit the plant. Nano Yield technology is an easy, affordable way to protect your investment. You spend all this money on these crop inputs. Margins are very, very tight. Use this product to make your stuff more effective. Once you see it work, you will never want to spray without it. You insure your equipment. Why not insure your crop inputs? Nano Yield's family-owned company, and they proudly make their products right here in the United States of America. Just listen to Toby Keith this morning when I was in the shower, and you know what? Just made me feel good. By God, putting boots in the asses and courtesy of the red, white, and blue. Anyway, that's my friends over at Nano Yield. It's www.nano, N-A-N-O-yield, nano-yield.com. Check it out. All right, Brant. Covered a lot there. Go.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree with Preston on many things. I was here when flood irrigation was going on, and we thought that was the thing to do. And then we had some people that went to pivots because their ground wasn't possible to be leveled and utilized for flood. And then in 1997, my family transitioned 100% away from flood over to pivots because we saw the efficiency of it and the labor savings and everything else, just an overall efficiency system, energy, labor, equipment, time, and water. And then fast forward to now, my brother and I put in a subsurface drip field. We struggled with that. We had a lot of challenges with that. I personally have gone to mobile drip irrigation using a company called Dragonline out of Ulysses, Kansas, where you convert your sprinkler to mobile drip irrigation, and you have less evaporation, less transpiration, all of that going on. Those are conservation pieces. I'm a huge fan of soil moisture probes, and anybody out here listening that's saying, I want to try a soil moisture probe, I challenge you to make at least a 3-year commitment because every year is a little different and you're going to see different things. And you need to see you need to have a 3-year trial to make sure you understand how it's going to work over time. You don't pick a hybrid that won 1 year and just go with that. You've got to see multiple years of that to get an understanding how the water works in your soil. So I am 100% with Preston on all of that.
I'm guessing
and
that
I think
you are
that's
probably, and again, we're not in any way being insulting or judging, but you're probably at the forefront of the water use issue. And Preston would probably say there's a whole bunch of producers out here that don't do any of the stuff that Brant just talked about. And they assume that they're always going to have plenty of water. And then I want to point out the other thing about this, and this is the political part of it. Whether it's a data center or homes in eastern Colorado, here's the thing. What we always do in ag, just like the recording I did with Zach Smith with Stock Cropper a couple of weeks ago that came out. And I put out there about nitrates getting in the water supply. What's the first thing farmers do? That ain't me. It's them damn towns that's doing this. And of course, what Zach pointed out, he said, yeah, let's just run through. He's an Iowa guy. And he said, yeah, for the amount of nitrates that get in, say, the Raccoon River going to Des Moines to come from homeowners, that means that the average homeowner will be putting on 15,000 pounds of Scott's Turf Builder from Home Depot. Excuse me, it's not even plausible. And of course, that's the same thing we say, it's not us that's using the water. Now, in this case, it is, excuse me, the homeowner and in eastern Colorado is using water. So the thing is, where are we though on this whole front of we're using it sometimes. I'm in Arizona right now, my winter home, and I can tell you these farms out south of Phoenix, I go dove hunting there. And I got to say that sometimes they're not exactly being judicious with their water. And I think to myself, we're being told, hey, you should take out your yard and put in desert landscaping in Phoenix. Why? So they can grow alfalfa down here? So, that's where I think you got to ask the question.
That's a great point. A year ago, I went and spoke at Arizona University. Had some producers come in and we're talking about water conservation and different practices. And I was there as a producer who'd utilized Dragonline to talk to them about my experience with it, because they didn't just want to hear from the company and the salesman. They said, you have to bring a producer. So I got brought along. And what I learned about those guys out there is they don't have a water problem. They have a water efficiency problem. They've got lots of water and nobody's cutting them off. Those guys, now they get probably 2 more cuttings of alfalfa than we do, but those guys are using 8 acre feet or more to grow their alfalfa. Okay. To put it out in perspective, when our water rights were perfected in Kansas, we got 2 acre feet per acre. They're using 8 acre feet per acre to grow what they do, because they're growing the most water intensive crop in the hottest, driest area in the United States. Now, they have dairies there. They need to utilize that. I understand that. But you talk about and the glutton of crop and everything else. One thing that's different and unique about my area is the I don't know what percentage of beef are fed in Kansas and western Kansas and western Nebraska and Texas, Panhandle all the way. But you got the beef industry and you got the dairy industry that's moved in. Okay. We're in a grain deficit area. So just because we're irrigating to grow grain, we're not exporting our grain. It might run through an ethanol plant and then come back out. But wet distillers grains is the most efficient way to feed coarse grains to animals. Now we supplement that with that flaked grain or cracked corn or whatever too. But the challenge is we need to transition from growing 25 to 30 ton corn silage into growing 20 to 25 ton sorghum silage on twice as many acres. Because you can rail in the corn
with half the water,
with half the water. Yeah.
So where's the problem, Preston? You cover a lot of swath, right? You're all over the place. What's the problem? Is it a problem? I mean, I'm asking the question. You and I both, we all three think there's an absolute problem. I think that the bullseye is going to be on the back of agriculture, just like nitrates in the water. I can go through every one of these challenges, and I had these people, Zach, on my show. No, it ain't us. Like, I don't know how much more you will put your head in the sand. First off, you're completely outnumbered. There's 1.8 million farms, of which about 10% of them, 170,000 of them, do almost all of the production in this country. So you think that you're going to win versus the homeowners in Denver? You think you're going to win versus Microsoft, Amazon, and NVIDIA when it comes to data center development? So there we are. So you go, Preston. What we admit that there's a problem, and part of it's that we're misutilizing the resource. But where is this? Where are we going?
Efficiency. Efficiency needs to be efficiency needs to be picked up. And it's the easiest thing to do now.
Yeah.
The technology is out there and available to you. The new farm bill has just said that they're going to cover 90% of said technologies. Okay. There are all sorts.
If I'm a producer like Brant and I want to deploy new technology like you deal with there with your company, PumpTrakr, I can get a grant. Then it reduces my water utilization by half just by putting in moisture sensors and pump, the right kind of equipment.
I'm not going to say by half, but I'll say realistically by 30%. Okay. Without, and I wouldn't, I don't think I'm going to get attacked for that too much. But what
Brant, you're the farmer out there in Kansas. Is it true? First off, there is grant money that I can get from United States Department of Agriculture where I can use this if I'm using it to put in technology.
Qualify. That's a brand new thing that hasn't been amped out yet. But
yeah, that would probably fall under NRCS or Equip or something like that.
That's exactly what it falls under.
And he's exactly right. There is a lot of inefficiencies out here in the pumping system and the delivery system. And the county I'm in, there's no flood irrigation anymore. There's only center pivot irrigation. And we can take that a step further by even going to mobile drip irrigation, or you put in subsurface drip irrigation. The thing is, mobile drip irrigation will cost you about 20 to 25% of what a subsurface drip irrigation system costs. So you're talking about a massive amount of money outlaid, whether it's subsidized or not, and how far will the subsidy dollars go. So you got to put them in the right programs. But the efficiency is huge, and you could save a lot of money by improving pumping systems and everything. Like he said, I completely understand that. We've done that for years. And then Kansas has a program where they bring out professional engineers and different things, and they look at your whole system from where it comes out of the ground to where it goes, the water gets put back into the ground, and they give you a report on, hey, here's how you can save this much. We feel like you can save this much by implementing an efficiency system. So Preston's absolutely right on there, and that needs to be done because a lot of guys really don't recognize that, because this is what we've always done, right? That's the thing you said at the beginning. This is what we've always done. It's 100% correct. The one thing I would challenge you on, and even it goes into the nitrates and everything else, is you said the only way water leaves the United States is in a spaceship, and that's not true. It goes out.
Yeah, I was going to challenge him on that too, Brant.
It goes out to Mississippi, and it goes out to every river that dumps into the ocean.
Yeah.
And I often say we don't have a shortage of water in this country. We just have it in the wrong places. And now that's a whole nother topic to how do we resolve that, because that's a pretty big challenge. But there's water
Preston
in places.
wanted to respond to what we said. Yes, I said the only water that leaves the Earth's atmosphere, I think, is what I meant to say. But yes, we know from the hydrologic cycle, precipitation, transpiration, evaporation, etc. But go ahead, Preston.
Yeah, no, that's where I was going to hit you. Was I'm sorry, but we have sand from the Sahara Desert that comes over here and gets involved. I promise you, when we have evaporation that comes up, that gets transported other places as well. So, from that standpoint, that's where I was going to hit you. I wasn't going to get too crazy about it, though.
So the part here, respond to whatever Brant said here. I guess the big one I'm going to go with is we said that we're going to have water, and we talked about reduction. But even if we reduce the amount of water being used, does that the aquifers took? I think that we haven't had glaciers for about 10,000 years, right? I think isn't that when the Wisconsin glacier melted off, right there where my farm is in Huntington, Indiana, is right about where the glaciers came to there and then retreated. It took a hell of a long time to create the Ogallala Aquifer. I don't know that any of us are young enough to live long enough to see. That's the problem, is the time frame that it takes to recharge these aquifers. I don't know that even if we reduce our usage, we're going to do it. But you tell me, you're the guy, Preston, that's in the business.
Okay. How about this? We could waste time getting into an argument over whether we're going to deplete it or not. Mm-hmm. But we do know that we have depleted it. We can waste time talking about whether we're going to recharge it or not by doing and being the said efficient, doing things in an efficient manner and more efficient manner. But doing nothing.
No.
continuing down the same path we're on right now costs us money and efficiency that people don't even pay attention to. You know, when you save the amount of water that you save, okay, the energy that you save, whether that be, once again, fossil fuels or in energy usage or in electrical usage, okay, more than pays for itself. But when you're sitting there and you know for a fact now there's too many people that have done it, that have been efficient with their watering, have gotten the same crops and the same yields done, why wouldn't you do it? And I mean, you know, and when you do, and by doing so, the technology's cost, their cost now is to a point where it's 100% ROI year on year whenever you use soil moisture meters, and the pump automation is 100% ROI year on year. There are some people who have stretched the boundaries. We've talked about this before with VCs entering the game. They've developed massive platforms with massive amount of little utilities that you could use or whatever. But too many farmers come to me and go, I don't need all that crap. Yeah. This is what I need. Okay? Don't start charging me, you know, said more amount of renewal every year in order because you put this in that I'm not going to use. Charge me a smaller renewal and just give me focused on what I want. And we're going to do that. I mean, obviously the money's running away from precision ag right now. We've talked about that in the past, and I made the prediction in our meetings that we're going to see the greatest, the single greatest growth in technology and useful technology in the next 3 years because we have less money coming in from out there. We're going to do things that the farmers actually want. Okay, you can make all those arguments. But the fact is if you can sit here and you can do this, it will cost you nothing in order to do so. Matter of fact, it will make you money. Why not? Why not take the chance that we actually, you know, that we're given the next few generations? Because if the other question you're going to ask me is do I think this is going to affect us by the time we leave this earth? No, I do not. But I'm trying to think about the future. I'm trying to think about the generations next.
You think that we could continue on the path we're on, and really, you and I aren't going to live long enough for it to matter. And I'm not sure that's true. Again, I don't think our population changes that much. We're going to grow by a couple percent, maybe, depending on immigration. So water utilization, but where water utilization spikes is, again, on this data center thing, which, granted, I'm not a tech person, but by God, I've read a lot about this. So when you think about it, water consumption goes up with just like electricity consumption goes up with an advancement of an economy. So really what we're talking about, it's not because, okay, we're going to have another 100 million people. It's because the advancement of an economy uses more water. Manufacturing, you know, agriculture is obviously a big user of it, but then you start talking about data centers, manufacturing, et cetera, people living in bigger homes take bigger showers and bigger pools and all this kind of thing, and bigger yards, all that. So I do think that you and I are going to live long enough that we will see this thing come to a head. And I think it's going to come to a head very promptly. And I tell you what, maybe it wouldn't have. But again, this data center thing, by God, when NVIDIA, which the value of NVIDIA is more than all but like 10 countries, total economy. so, I mean, when they say we want water, I think it's going to change things. Brant, go ahead.
Well, and I thought I heard Preston say that the changes we'll put in place to correct it, we won't live long enough to see those. I thought that's the direction he went with it. But either way, I get the point. The data centers are going to be.
By the way, there's the question for you: are we going to? Because he said we can argue about whether we're even got a problem. I don't think nobody on this call thinks that we don't have a problem, right?
Oh, no, we have a huge problem.
I picked up a National Geographic when I was like maybe 10 or 12 years old and read about this thing called the Ogallala Aquifer, which is under, 9 western states. And it was 45 years ago being depleted. And I've been dialed into this ever since. We didn't have this problem in Huntington, Indiana. My God, we got water coming out our ears up there. So I've been reading about it. So I think we got a problem. His point was, can we take corrective measures at Peterson Farms in western Kansas that actually move the needle and start replenishing the Ogallala Aquifer by the time you're hanging your hat up and being done farming for the rest of your life?
Me by myself, yeah, I can take changes that'll have an impact. They'll be really small. We have to get together and make larger changes. The one thing that I will say that I hear in conversations just more locally here, as I've described here, we've done a lot to become efficient here, incredibly efficient with what we do. We used to use, let's say, 700 gallons per quarter on 125 acres to grow depending on the year, 250 crop. Now we could do the same with 450 gallon. We've gotten better. Hybrids have gotten
by the way,
better.
those numbers, 450 gallons from 700, what, per bushel?
No, 450 gallons per minute on 125 acres.
Okay.
And then the yield is the total yield of the field, the bushel per acre for the yield.
And we should point out also from the math standpoint, when you were referencing you versus Arizona, since I referenced that, south of where I'm sitting right now, you said using 8 acre feet per year. So that the person listening to this, we pulled up the number before we hit record. 325,851 gallons is an acre foot. So if you are not familiar with the water vernacular, 12 inches of water over 1 acre of land. If you're saying, Damian, I'm an ag person, but I'm embarrassed to admit an acre is roughly the size of a football field. Actually, if you want to get even more precise, it's about the size of a football field minus one of the end zones, almost as I would say 43,560 square feet. So an acre feet is roughly 326,000 gallons is what 12 inches of water over 1 acre of land amounts to. And they're using 8 of that, which of course then is 2.5 million gallons
for an acre to grow alfalfa. Yeah.
In Arizona.
And what I was pointing out was the efficiency that we've developed and gotten much better at by necessity here. We've gotten incredibly efficient, and we're still depleting the aquifer. We have to conserve. So there's two different things. It's kind of like there's fair and there's equal. There's efficiency, which in many places efficiency will move the needle because there's enough inefficiency that efficiency will make an impact. When you get to where I'm at, we're already pretty darn efficient with how we deliver the water and how we utilize the water and what we produce with the water. Now we're getting to the point, okay, we need to conserve. The challenge is we've got industry out here of dairy and beef cattle and of the sort that are willing to pay for the crops. And so, that's where the challenge of capitalism comes in, and how do you manage this? And so I would argue that they need to pay more for some of the crops, and we need to grow less water intensive crops to help conserve water. Because we're already efficient here. So that's kind of a thought that I have there.
All right, wait, Preston's got, by the way, I like that you guys don't lack opinions. The worst guest you can ever get on here is somebody that doesn't know anything and also is afraid to say anything. And I've had some of those, by the way, and there's sometimes with some of our commodity groups, believe it or not. Anyway, let's talk about my friends over at Tidal Grow. If you're looking for cutting-edge bio-based solutions that deliver measurable yield performance with a great return on your investment, talk about this company called Tidal Grow Agri-Science. We did a field day at my farm, De La Rosa Farms in Huntington, Indiana last year. We did plots. We're going to do it again this year. It's really cool stuff. I got my farm friend to go out and we put these things in. We measured it. We were very scientific about this, and I saw some really cool stuff. So I'm finally doing farm trials like a real farmer. Tidal Grow Agri-Science utilizes upcycled seafood byproducts to precisely formulate powerful plant nutrition and crop protection chemistry. That's right, seafood byproducts. This is not seaweed. This is dead fish. Stinks terribly, by the way, but it works. This is real science powered by nature, built to positively impact your bottom line. Their products do not require you to change anything. They work right alongside with your current crop inputs, your fertilizer, your herbicide, your pesticide program. You don't have to change anything. It's about getting more out of what you are already doing. You want to learn more, go to Tidal Grow Ag. That's Tidal, not like somebody's title. I'm talking Tidal like a bunch of water, which is the subject of this podcast. Tidal, Tidal, TidalGrowAg.com. Check it out. Tell them Damian Mason sent you. All right, Preston. Don't you like that I gave you compliments? I said he's intelligent and he's not afraid to share his opinion. That's the best thing we could ever ask for.
No. I appreciate that.
I thought you were going to say like the Tidal Grow, it stinks, but it works. Like Preston, I thought you were going to say like one of us, it stinks, but it works.
No, none of that. None of that.
I mean, I will say this. There's been that old adage out there for years about, better to remain silent and thought a fool than open your mouth and remove all doubt. Well, I am the world's worst example of opening your mouth and removing all doubt, okay, because
So-
I won't stop speaking. But efficiency by necessity.
Yeah. Well,
Is
but you
different.
said, and that's Brant's point was, okay, maybe we can't. It took thousands of years to get that water in the aquifer. Are we going to look back and say, yeah, we sure screwed that up? We just burned up, 500,000 years of water, and we did it in about 80 years. We going to say that?
I mean, that's the fact of it, but go ahead, Preston, finish your thoughts there.
Yeah, no, yes. I guess when I'm speaking in a generality of over the entirety of the United States, getting more efficient, and by everybody getting more efficient, okay, that's going to help out our areas that have been forced into efficiency by necessity. That is the general thought of that, of that line of thinking. And then we got to, we don't just get there by efficiency. Now we got to start talking about cuts. Okay. And we got to start making cuts in the way that we do certain things of that nature. So there are too many people that are out there that will tell you that I am very, very efficient right now. Well, it got to the point you had to be. Okay. And Brant, this is not an attack on you. I want you to understand that. All right. I'm saying that there is but there's plenty of people out there who look at you and talk about how efficient they are. And it's everybody else, and it's on everybody else, or the solutions you try to talk to them about. They don't want to hear about it because they've already started to go there. And you're absolutely right. I mean, and let me say this. To qualify something I said earlier about the difference between flood irrigation and overhead. All right. Overhead irrigation is much more efficient whenever you actually have the capability to do land level, when you don't have the capability to do the land leveling, land forming needed to make sure that you get that water across there. But when you can take care of it, as we have, flood irrigation is just as efficient whenever it comes down to it. Too many. I've had the outside people that hate flood irrigation come in and tell me I can't really give you, a definitive answer whenever it comes to that. So that's where my comment from earlier. I don't want to take anybody and make them think that I'm attacking the overhead industry, because I have people that think I do already, but that's probably because I'm in the land loving business.
Overhead generally means like center pivot irrigation. If you're working in ag, but you aren't familiar with this, when you fly from my place here in Phoenix to my other place in Indiana, you look down and you see for a long, long time those big old circles. UFOs didn't do that. Those called center pivot irrigation. And I've worked for all the center pivot companies have hired me to do speaking engagements for them. I like those folks. But I also told those people, with Zimatic, for instance, I said, you know what, friends, you're going to sell new equipment, but it ain't going to be for new wells if you're west of the Mississippi River. And I'm not being mean. I'm just looking at where I see the future going. So let's talk about where we think the future goes. I think that we're going to have, you talk about efficiency. I don't think there's going to be any choice. I believe that the long arm of regulation is coming fast. Brant?
Well, water is the number one commodity on this planet. And if you have lots of water, you can have lots of problems like drainage and nutrient runoff and everything else. If you have no water, you just have one problem. And that's the part where the West is at. We're down to one problem. So and my great grandfather used to say this, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting.
I was just going to say that. Brant is my favorite. I did a gig for a cotton group out in the West years ago. And when I said, so what's the biggest problem you guys have? That's probably just markets, or, the fact that we don't have textile mills in the United States anymore. He says, well, that's a market problem. He says, what's our biggest problem? We ain't got no water. And I said, what? Because again, you're from where I'm from. We get 38 inches of annual precipitation. They keep talking about climate change. We're getting a bit wetter and a bit warmer, which is fantastic. The West is getting drier. And that's exactly what they told me. Whiskey's for drinking, but water is for fighting. So I like that. So if you got no water, you got one problem. Preston, go.
No, it's 100%. That's the take. That's it. We don't talk about nitrogen leaching in the areas where they have water issues because they're not putting enough on to actually get themselves to a full point to ever even have that problem.
Yeah.
in general.
Nitrates getting into water are an issue in the Midwest. It ain't an issue where you don't have any rain. So go ahead, Brant. What do you see happening? I mean, obviously you're on the Kansas Water Board, or Water Authority, I should say. You're on the board of Kansas Water Authority. They know that there's regulation coming, and it's not going to be just by state. I don't think. What do you see happening?
Well, and I want to be real careful. I don't speak for the Water Authority. I sit there. I've been on there for 4 months. I've been involved with Kansas Water since 2000 in different aspects. And I've just
disclaimer asterisk. He is not speaking on behalf of the Kansas Water Authority. He's speaking on behalf of a Western Kansas farmer. And
this was told to me. This was told to me 25 years ago. At some point, the United States is going to have to figure out how to continually irrigate the high plains in order to maintain our agricultural dominance in the world. And we saw through COVID and other things, and being able to grow your own stuff is very important, and it's important for your national security. Our agricultural dominance is a portion of our security. Then you can make the argument for data centers, whatever. Water is going to be managed differently going forward. It is going to be looked at differently going forward. Everything Preston says is correct. Everything that Damian says is correct. And everything that I'm saying is correct. Now, how all that comes to fruition, how it comes to be, because they're fighting on the Colorado River right now with that. Kansas just happens to have some of the best water law of many of the Ogallala states. And the water in Kansas belongs to the people of Kansas. That's something very, very unique to any other. The other thing we've done is in the 70s, the Kansas Water Act was put in, there's a different amendment to it, and then GMDs were formed, and then later they required water meters on every well. So they started actually documenting and we have the more data than any other state, hands down.
What you said a GMD, just for the person that's not familiar, that's some sort of a district?
Sure. That's a local groundwater management district. And I sit in what's called Southwest Kansas GMD number 3. And what that is I guess I don't like this term, but this is the fastest way to explain it. It's like our union. It's local control. It's local voice. We have 15. We vote on our board of delegates, and we have 15 people from the states and from municipality and industry and all that. And they are the local voice. They have no regulatory authority, but they're there and they're to help the constituents, right? And so then, and I was saying, okay, then on top of that, the Kansas Geological Service went and took every drill log that they could get their hands on for as far back as they could go. And they made a 3D model of the Ogallala and area. We know where red bed is. We know where shale is. We know where different formations are and different things. And then we're constantly monitoring the levels of everything. And so because of all that, Kansas is light years ahead of other states in what we've done. And mainly our friends to the south, Oklahoma and Texas, which have a completely different water law, which is called right to capture. And so they could just keep drilling wells and keep going. We cannot drill a new appropriation here. We haven't been able to for 20 years. More or less 20 years. I mean, there's a few exceptions, but we can re-drill existing wells, but we can't drill new wells. So that's something that people need to understand. We're not just drilling new appropriations. We're re-drilling old existing. Our red bed here is 600 foot deep. My house well's 590 foot deep. And it also sits in what's called the Dakota Aquifer, which is below the Ogallala. So there's so many things and layers upon layers of all this. But what's going to happen? We're going to have to get real serious about water utilization in this country. And one of the things that I firmly believe that is coming is we're going to have to get the water from where it's in excess and causing damage to where it's in depletion and causing to the point it's causing damage. And we're going to have to figure out how we do that.
Preston, this sounds like a problem for you. It sounds like your next agricultural entrepreneurial venture.
Well, I don't want to mess with another venture right now. I got too many irons in the fire and juggling too many things right now. There's one thing I did want to cover here, okay? And that I don't think that we have said yet. Just to acknowledge each and every person out there with all of your unique problems that you have. Irrigation is much more complex than anybody realizes, okay? When people think about irrigation, they picture us just turning it on and turning it off, and it's that easy, and that could not be further from the truth. Okay, the reality is there are multiple wells out there, multiple circuits in some people's cases. Brant, I would imagine you have one well feed, you have multiple wells feeding the circuit of pivots and things of that nature out there. Everybody has a different thing happening, but we're talking about wells spread across miles. They run around the clock. They need to be started, stopped, switched between fields, repaired, and monitored. All of that happening while you got a crop on a tight schedule. Okay. It is not easy, and there's not a one size fits all thing out here for all of us, but there are ways that we can improve. There are ways we can cut our cost and our loss and try to be good stewards as we go. That's where I'm at. And I'm sorry, Damian. I guess I didn't stay on point there for what you wanted me to, but I needed to cover that.
But that's good. I appreciate it. What Brant was saying though is, okay, Kansas has a real good situation. He's very explanatory there about they're not putting in new wells other than just to replace. But do you see land being idled? I want to go with each of you because I mean, whether it's by regulatory or by virtue of, in the panhandle of Texas, is my understanding, you can drill all the hell you want. You ain't gonna get nothing. It's like you might as well go here in my office and dig for gold. Okay, you can do it all you want, but there's none there. That's where I think that we're going to see this from the economic standpoint, even before the environmental regulation. Some areas are just period, and it doesn't bode well for us. We're like, oh yeah, we used it all up, and more importantly, we used it all up to grow a bunch of stuff that again, we're struggling to even find demand for it. That's where I think that acres do get idled. Go ahead, Preston, you were ready to go.
In the world of land leveling and land forming out there, for some of you, that's just going to be an absolute foreign topic. Brant actually understands what we're talking about with that. Years ago, Equip used to come in with money and they would cost share with you because you were increasing your efficiency by having land leveled to one prescribed slope throughout. You were going to use less water because you were going to be more efficient with it, and that was the nature. Well, about 15 years ago, almost 20 now, we started to, it went the other side, which as we started to get water critical areas started to grow more and more and more, in areas that weren't as critical, they weren't getting that equip money. Only that equip money was going to people who were doing things of like a tailwater recovery plan, where they had where they have a why in the world can I think of?
And by the way, just while he's thinking of that, EQIP, in case you're not familiar, is a government program. It's through the United States Department of Agriculture or Natural Resource Conservation Service.
Reservoir.
Preston's point was, because it was good for the environment, they would fund certain things like land leveling so that you utilized less water resource because it was getting across the acre more effectively. So good.
So tailwater recovery systems where you have your ditching and things of that nature, and your canals that are all alongside where you're irrigating, then you're relifting that water out of those ditches to take care of that watering. And then when you're done with it and it drains off, you're taking that back to a reservoir. And this is all in the trying to make sure you use less water in these water critical areas.
It's like the catalytic converter, if you will. You're essentially taking the water, and then what didn't get burnt the first time, like that's what the idea of the catalytic converter was. It threw it back there again and utilized the same gas twice. Are land acres going to get idled, Brant? I say yes. Some cases, just because it does not make any sense. I've referenced parts of the Panhandle of Texas, for instance, or alternative use. What do you see happening?
Well, absolutely. As it becomes uneconomical for us to lift water from 500 feet to grow a crop because we just can't get the rate that would be deemed effective, or if somebody's well that wasn't that deep and they look at it and they say, I don't want to spend 150,000 to have a well that'll pump 150 gallons a minute. It's not effective. It's not good use of money. That land then gets put idle, and that water right is not used. Now, the problem with that, and the thing that a lot of us are really, really concerned with, is when you take the tax base, okay, so I'm going to explain this so Damian doesn't have to stop and explain it. So your tax base on your ground, if you have an irrigated land that's tax base, it's taxed as irrigated land with beneficial use, and they have all this formula and algorithm. And I'm just going to give a number, like say a quarter in my county would be $3,600 tax annually for that. Okay, now if you're no longer pumping that well, then you turn that to dry land. Okay, so now it's a dry land tax base. Now the beneficial use of dry land and the ability to make money off of that and everything. Now the taxes on that just went to $1,000 or $1,100 an acre. Now, before some of you lose your mind,
not $1,000 an acre.
A quarter. I'm sorry, not a quarter. Before everybody loses their mind, you got to realize we get 15 inches of rain annually. Right now, our dry land is selling for about $1,300 an acre. So this is not, Damian's other farm. This is not Arkansas. This is where it's dry, and this is what you can produce, and this is what the ground brings. So you worry about your communities and the amount of people. If it takes one person to take care of 200 acres of irrigated land, I'm just using a round number. One person can do 2,000 acres of irrigated land. That same one person can do 20,000 acres of dry land. So now we have less people in our communities. Now we have less kids in our schools. Now we have less people using our hospitals. And then it just snowballs after that, right? Rural America going away. And so keeping our economic viability in the West, and I'm going to say all the West, because this is true from Lubbock, Texas to Goodland, Kansas, and up into Ogallala, Nebraska. It's all the same thing. Do we lose our communities if we lose our economic viability, which is tied to the water? Now, we're pumping water out and we're growing crops, and we're turning that crop into boxed beef and milk and cheese and products that leave. We also export a lot of sorghum out of the state, but that is what, we're not growing it to export water. We're not growing it to export corn. We're churning that over several times to, ethanol leaves, and we take the wet distiller's grain. We don't even use dry distiller's grain. We use wet distiller's grain. We don't even dry it. We just haul it straight to them and they feed it. So there's this industry out here that's been built on the water. Because without the water, it wouldn't be here. But this is the area where the animals need to be fed. It's got the dry, humid climate. It's got the low rainfall. Animals lose 10% efficiency when they're standing up to their dew claw in mud. So there's lots of reasons why this industry is right here. And yes, the aquifer has been depleted and continued to. There are actions being in place to work to regulate that. Yes, land will be put aside to not be irrigated, and it will grow dryland crops. It'll still be utilized to grow dryland crops. I kind of got some ugly looks. I've said a long time ago, if you can't grow a dryland crop on your land, I really don't feel like you have much business irrigating it, because the amount of water it takes to overcome what Mother Nature has there, whether it's all sand or whether you're in the desert of Arizona or whatever, what you're already trying to overcome is so insurmountable that it just takes gallons and gallons and gallons of water to overcome that. So that's back to efficiency, right? How efficient are you? And so there's whole lots of things around that. Will land be put aside? Yes. Will it be done with funds? Some, not really. The equip thing, I've always had a problem with that, because for my family or our operation, we had already converted center pivot. And so anything that we had that wasn't, we didn't qualify, because if you've already done it, the government won't let, whether that's moisture probes, whether that's NRCS and using moisture probes. If you've already been using moisture probes on this ground, they're not going to cost share on that. I struggle with those kind of things in the implementation. I see a benefit to them. I struggle with the efficacy of the funds being used, right? So that's my thoughts. Yes, water will be set aside, the land will be set aside and not irrigated on. Absolutely.
Yeah, by the way, that was an amazing wrap for Brant, because he brought in the economics, he brought in the viability of towns, etc. Where does Preston, where do lands get idled? Is it the stuff out here where I go dove hunting south of Phoenix, where they're producing dairy? Dairy's among the most water intensive things that we can produce in agriculture. Why are we doing it in the desert? Well, because to Brant's point, those cows are in great shape. You don't have to have enclosed. All you have is a shade and some fans and the water and the feed. You can get 8 cuttings of alfalfa. You don't ever have to worry about they don't really cut it. They chop it, of course, for silage. it's easier to make it dairy here than it is in Green Bay, Wisconsin. But also, we don't get any water here. So where does the land get idled? And I guess you kind of spin off of what Brant just said.
There's the easy answers like you just talked about out west, you know, in those areas. Yeah, you'll start to make those choices. But the fact is that each state is going to have to put some at idle. Okay. To me, it'll have to happen. Probably when we get down to it, well, you know, by the time they get done looking at everything and they start to look at who's got water and who doesn't, who can actually, you know, take care of the data centers and who can't, you know, Damian, home for you, well, Arizona right now, I mean, Indiana,
right?
Okay, we'll have plenty more there than what they will in other places. Michigan, you know, different other spots like that where their biggest problem is their water table is constantly creeping up on them. Well, there's going to be plenty to do there, but you know, none of that will answer the bigger question of all, which is how do we, you know, we need everybody, regardless of how good a situation you're in or how bad a situation you're in, needs to get to that level of efficiency. And the money is there for you to be able to do that now. Yeah. Okay. Even as bad at economic times. Okay. It's proven right now that the ROI is there on these technologies to be able to use them and implement them. And don't say, like Brant said earlier, don't say I'm going to use them 1 year and I'm going to make my decision on it. Okay.
Yeah.
Use them 3 years. Mm-hmm. Do 3 years. Get a spread of data out there, and then come and tell me that they don't work. Okay, because you would be absolutely full of crap at that point. Mm-hmm. I had to stop myself from using the S word on that one.
It's fine.
Okay, but anyway, I just, you know, that's it. We're going to see obviously the bigger percentage of where we see land let out and idle will be in the water critical areas where we already know we're not going to make enough cuts in order to make it happen. Yep. Okay. Or at some point in time, they're going to go out, but we still have to make sure that we do it in the areas, you know, and let's be proactive instead of reactive and actually start to make some decisions about things before we get into those deals where we talked about, because I still believe in my heart of hearts, and this is not just because I make money in this industry. Okay. I believe in my heart of hearts, and I've been even confused with a hippie for saying this, okay, which I don't know why. But at the end of the day, we can make changes now to where efficiency isn't a necessity. Yeah. Why not do it? Yeah. Okay, Brant and guys like that don't have any choice right now, but guess what? We have them in certain areas, or at least we believe if we implement it right now, maybe we can shortstop it from having to be something that has to happen. That's where I'm at. That's where my thoughts are. So I might be crazy.
I know there's a topic that spins off a little bit of the one I did previously about the nitrates in the water, and phosphates are another issue. And I got to be honest with you, all of them probably sound like I'm somehow pushing for regulation. Clearly, I'm not. I'm very libertarian. I've been paying attention for a long, long time, and I get out and I cover this country, and I'm on airplanes, and I live part of the time in the suburbs. And I can tell you that the people in this home right here behind me, if they thought that somehow they're supposed to not have water to put in their pool so that we can grow alfalfa using, in many cases, triple the amount of water that would really require because they can just be wasteful with it, they're going to say, well, that's bullshit. I want my water for my pool, you know, and so I guess I see this coming because of the ballot box, the lobbyists, the groups, whatever. I like Brant's take on if there's not a bigger appeal. You know, we in farming say stuff like we're stewards of the land, and I can drive through Minnesota, and as soon as the combine leaves the field, they come in and rip it up so that rich, beautiful black soil can get blown and washed away from October until May when they have a crop on it. And you're trying to tell me you're a steward of the land? I'm not sure I'm buying your thing. We tell ourselves a story. Oh no, we care about the aquifer. Really? You just literally deplete it. So I think that sometimes it begins with us looking in the mirror, Brant. I think that's something that you've been pretty honest about.
I really try to be, and I really loved what Preston said there. It's something that I've been bringing up, and as humans, we have this this default, and as this country, we have this default, and absolutely as my state, we have this default, and as farmers, we have this default. We need to be proactive, not reactive. And that is the thing to keep in our mind, because we could all sit here and probably name some companies that were reactive and they're not here no more.
Yeah.
It's the ones that are proactive that are sustaining. And the last thing I'll say, that kind of is a saying that I have is, nobody's ever conserved themselves to prosperity.
Yeah.
We have to come up with solutions to be prosperous, and that's with proactivity.
I like it. So we asked the question up front: will we have water? I say yes, but it's going to be on way less places, on considerably less acres, and there's going to be folks that are going to not have it just because of the realities. I think that we all kind of agree on that. Yes, Brant, we'll have water, but we're going to have less of it.
Yeah, we'll have water here. We're gonna have less of it, and then we're gonna have to figure out other ways to either get water or utilize water, or better beneficial use. But we're crafty people. The Americans are, and we're going to be. And so I'm still bullish on American ag and irrigation. We're just going to have to solve this problem.
Preston, you're part of that You're part of that solution with your company, right?
Yes, sir. With both companies that I work with. Yeah, absolutely.
And if somebody wants to learn more about you or those companies, where do they go?
www.pumptrakr.com.
PumpTrakr. And by the way, I think the tracker is spelled TRAKR, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
If anybody wants to learn more about what you've got going on there, Brant, because you obviously you're involved in the water board. You're a board member on the Water Authority. You're a sorghum. You're on the Grain Sorghum Commission for Kansas. You're a farmer. If somebody wants to find you, what's the best way to find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Winsome Farms, or search up my name. I'm on there. There's lots of places to find my name and number, but you can hit me up there. Go to Kansas Grain Sorghum Commission and look them up there, and reach out through that aspect as well.
His name's Brant Peterson. He's joined by Preston Marthey. They're both sharp dudes. I'm glad they came on the show. You know what? We're like pushing almost 450 episodes. We've been doing this for almost 9 years here at the Business of Agriculture. I really appreciate your support. If you learned something from this, share it from somebody else can benefit from it. Do go to my YouTube channel, hit subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. You can keep up with me, and also if you've got a meeting that you want me to speak at, that's where I make my real money. So please remember my sponsors that sponsor this show, and also if you have a meeting that needs somebody on stage to talk about the future for American agriculture, please consider me. Till next time, thank you very much for being here. Thanks to my guests, Brant and Preston. I'm Damian Mason, and this is the Business of Agriculture. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Business of Agriculture, brought to you by my friends at AgView Solutions. I told you up front about AgView Solutions. They're an advisory group for agriculture professionals that can help you in your agricultural business and your farming operation. Maybe it's transition planning, analyzing your cost of production, strategic growth initiatives, discovering business opportunities and ferreting them out, overall improvements to your farm and your agricultural business. That's what they do as advisors. The team at AgView Solutions is comprised of consultants who also farm and run multiple businesses. They get it. You can check out their services at agviewsolutions.com. They help farming operations in 25 states as well as Canada. agviewsolutions.com. Check it out.